This week's question to answer down in the comments is, we're approaching Halloween. A lot of people I know are doing the whole 31 days of Halloween, watching a horror movie a day. I want to know how you are watching your horror movies, whether you're watching them on DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, and if you're streaming, what are you streaming on? Because today we're going to talk about a lot of different formats. We're going to talk about a bunch of movies I've watched recently, and I've watched them in different ways. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And we'll talk about why Halloween's not canceled. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-Shirt, the channel where we take a new or a reissue horror movie or several horror movies and then pair them with a piece of reading, a piece of fiction that you will like if you like those movies. I'm the author of Clown in a Cornfield and several other books, almost nearly 10 other books you can go buy right now and check out. This is at Target's. This is at Barnes & Noble, this is on Amazon, and I will put links down in the description to go buy this. It's Halloween time. If you don't want to read a teen slasher with a killer clown in a cornfield around Halloween, I think you've come to the wrong place. But check it out. Thank you so much for the people who have checked it out. The support of this book has been unbelievable, has been incredible. Thank you so much. Today, as I said, we're going to be looking at several movies, and we're going to be looking at five movies. I don't know that I've ever done that before, except in kind of like a listicle sense. We're going to talk about 5 movies. I'm going to try to lightning round them, but I'll probably end up talking about them at length. So this might be a longer video, and if it's a longer video, great. I hope you stick around, and I hope you stick around for the book recommendation, because it's an awfully good one this week. The first movie we're going to talk about this week is Ladrones de Tumbas, and if you don't speak Spanish, which clearly from my pronunciation I don't, it quite literally translates to grave robbers. Not to be confused with any of the myriad other movies named Grave Robbers or The Grave Robbers. This is a late 1980s, 1989, I believe, supernatural slasher film. And this is out from Vinegar Syndrome, and they have their beautiful, evocative new cover art. And then if you check it out, if you remove the slip, they've got the reversible original cover art on there, which gives you, if you kind of put these two together, it gives you a real good idea of what the movie's like. This is directed by Ruben Galindo Jr., a director who's made a number of pictures and had a kind of large effect on horror cinema and exploitation cinema in the 80s in Mexico. And if you remember a couple of months ago, I had put out this call asking Blu-ray labels to put out more Mexican horror films. And I don't think that the timeline lines up. I don't think that I actually had any kind of influence on movies like this getting released, because I think they make those plans well in advance. But it's just a nice, happy accident. I don't know how things are going with you guys. I don't know how things, especially it being the beginning of October, and thinking about, well, normally I'd be going to pumpkin patches, or normally I'd be going to the movies to see a horror movie, or normally I'd be going to a haunted attraction or Halloween Horror Nights or something like that. With very few exceptions, like drive-ins are open and drive-ins are kind of picking up the slack, but with very few exceptions, those activities are not really on the table this year. Halloween itself is kind of, we have, at least in the States, we have mandates being passed where no trick-or-treating, no haunted houses, things like that. And just generally, probably doesn't seem like a good idea to go somewhere and have someone scream in your face this close in a conga line where they're doing that to a number of other people. This movie gave me, was like balm to my soul. This movie, I can liken it to the later era Friday the 13th films. The kind of in the way that those are kind of very action forward and have a lot of action to them, and have kind of over the top kills and over-the-top brutality and a kind of unkillable supernatural slasher. This has that. It opens with a brief cold open where we have this knight who has kidnapped a woman and is going to impregnate her with the spawn of Satan, and he gets captured by the Inquisition and tortured to death, and as the final killing blow, they put an axe in this satanic knight's chest. And flash forward to the 80s, to present day, and that axe gets removed by a group of kind of punk grave robbers who are out for treasure. And as soon as that's removed, the curse that this knight put on himself and on the bloodline of the Inquisitors, and he rises from the tomb and is just this badass zombie slasher with a hood and an axe, and some really cool makeup in the later scenes. And this is one of those movies where you're watching it and you're like, how have I not seen this before? How have I not heard of this? There have been DVD versions of this, but they've been really dicey before. The Vinegar Syndrome edition of this movie looks gorgeous, looks incredible. I don't really want to say anything more about it. It is kind of a no-frills supernatural slasher, but some of the kills are amazing. Some of the kills, because he is halfway a ghost, are almost Freddy inspired, and they're really wild. And there's just a hell of a lot of body count. There's just endless characters in this movie that keep coming in just to be murdered, and it's really, really great. It has a really great flavor to it because you're used to seeing kind of Canada and America in these movies, and you get to see Mexico in Grave Robbers, and it's really, really, really refreshing and great, and I really loved it. So I would highly recommend picking this up. As with everything, links down in the description. Next movie I want to talk about is the little seen Jaws 5. Yeah, Steven Spielberg, he came back to the Jaws series. Actually, like, after he did Jurassic Park, he was like, I just want to do one more Jaws. And he got his crew together. He got John Williams to do the score, and they really just knocked it out of the park. They made a great follow-up to the original Jaws. It's kind of like a reboot-quel because it ignores Jaws 2, 3, and the much derided Jaws 4 with Michael Caine. It ignores all of those, and it ignores the original, and none of what I just said is true. It's not real. There's no such thing as Jaws 5, although in some markets, the Italian Floridian co-production Cruel Jaws was released as Jaws 5, and you'd think that that would be kind of the most egregious, ridiculous, kind of illegal thing that this company did, to release this Bruno Mattei film did, but you'd be wrong actually, because Cruel Jaws is full of stolen footage. And footage they licensed kinda from other films, mainly The Last Shark or Great White. This is kind of where all the above ground shark stuff comes from. There's another film in there for a lot of the more toy looking miniatures work. I forget the name of the movie. And there's a couple cutaways that look suspiciously like Bruce from the first Jaws film. And then there is a score that not only riffs on the original Jaws, but also has a little bit of Star Wars and Indiana Jones in there. So it's John Williams-esque to the point of actual intellectual property theft. And then there's the script itself, which is just plays like almost you were playing Mad Libs with Steven Spielberg films, taking whole lines of dialogue. It's made in 1995, even though it looks kind of older. There's whole lines lifted from Jaws. There's whole lines lifted from Jurassic Park, the scene where they talk about the velociraptors, you're alive when they still start to eat you. They just make that about a shark in this. And all the additional footage, all the above water footage, was filmed in Florida, partly at the beaches, and then partly at a dolphin, sea lion kind of water SeaWorld knockoff. It is, I talk about a lot of films that are kind of acquired taste. I talk about a lot of films in such a way that, like, look at my Veronica review, where Veronica is now streaming on Shudder. People, I've heard them call it like the worst thing they've ever seen, and they watch this movie and they either just openly hate it, or they deride it, and they kind of derive like a Mystery Science 3000 kind of pleasure from watching it. Usually when I watch films, I kind of don't engage with them that way. Like, if a movie makes me laugh, it makes me laugh. If a movie makes me think, it makes me think. If a movie thrills me, it thrills me in any way, shape, or form, and I consider that a success. Something like Cruel Jaws, that's where I kind of admit, this movie is a trash film with a capital T, but I still really, really enjoy it. There's just a real charm to it. You add all these elements together. You add these kind of these actors from Florida that are like really, really trying. the weird enthusiasm, the weird huckstership of stealing all this stuff and stealing all these ideas and putting them in one movie, in one mid-90s movie, when you feel like the ship has kind of sailed on Italian exploitation to a certain extent. We've talked about Bruno Mattei films before. We've talked about Shocking Dark, and I think we've talked about Violence in a Women's Prison. He's not an inept director technically, but he is one of those directors who will do ridiculous things to stretch a buck and to make a profit and to make a movie that his investors are happy with, or at least have a saleable product that is exploitable. But surprisingly enough about Cruel Jaws, it's almost got like a family film vibe to it. Usually these movies are filled with extra sex and violence. That's kind of how the Italian model kind of worked. It's like, take a classier American film that was a hit, rip it off, add as many exploitable elements as you can to kind of pack people in the theaters, pack people in European theaters, and then later sell VHSs. Cruel Jaws kind of doesn't do that. Cruel Jaws is almost a more family-friendly version of something like Jaws or something like The Last Shark. It is fairly sexless, fairly goes soft on a lot of its characters. It's as close to family viewing as we usually get to talk about on this channel, but it's just really dumb and charming. Severin Films did an excellent job bringing this out, and I just don't know what kind of deal they struck to allow the shots from Jaws. It's real brief. There's like the lunging out of the water, Bruce lunging out of the water, but it's in here. So I'm guessing they got some kind of special permission from Universal to be allowed to even put this out. For collectors, it's a must. I'm not sure if the Jaws 5 slipcase, I don't think that's still in stock. I think that was either a pre-order thing or something they sold out of quickly. But you can get just this version, and it's if I have to convince you on this, it's not for you. But if you're like, hell yeah, Cruel Jaws, you probably already have it. So I don't even know why I'm trying to sell you on it. Next, we're gonna go in a completely different direction. This is not on Blu-ray. I don't think there's a Blu-ray at all for it because I think it is a Shudder exclusive. This movie played festivals, and I'd heard a little bit about it. Maybe real festivals kind of before the world had moved on, and then streaming festivals now that we're not going to movie theaters anymore. But the movie's called Scare Me. It is written, directed, and stars Josh Rubin. It is some kind of unholy mix between Creepshow and like an improv comedy show, but really well shot, really kind of thoughtfully put together. Not the kind of movie we typically talk about on here because it is a brand new movie. It is a 2020 release, but it's special for a few reasons, because it's about a horror screenwriter, or a would-be horror screenwriter that works in advertising, who kind of rents, I guess, like an Airbnb, a house up in upstate New York, and he's trying to get work done, and he's kind of unsuccessful, and he runs into, while he's out on a walk, he runs into an actual successful novelist, a kind of somewhat famous novelist, played by Aya Cash. And they, through happenstance, kind of get in this competition to tell each other stories. It is great for general audiences, and then because I am a horror writer, and because I've been doing this for 10 years, I've been publishing a mix of publishing with the small press, publishing with the medium press, publishing with the big press now with HarperCollins, with Clown in the Cornfield. It hit especially close to home, especially because I've gone to a number of horror conventions. You meet horror people, and you meet other writers, and you interact with them, and there's this kind of weird hierarchical way some writers interact with each other. This movie got that to a T, which is impressive, because half the time when you have a writer in a movie, there's just like verisimilitude goes right out the window, and it's just like, okay, we need to write this for a movie audience that isn't kind of gonna be wanting the inside baseball stuff. But something about this felt incredibly authentic. There's like, it's basically a 3 or 4 actor piece. Chris Redd from Saturday Night Live shows up at a certain point, and he's really funny. And it's a comedy. It's very funny. and then it has moments, especially towards like the final 20 minutes, where it becomes really thoughtful and really interesting. And there's a couple of shocks and there's a bunch of laughs, and it's really good. If you have Shudder, watch it. It's great. If you don't have Shudder, at some point they'd given me a code to give people that was like a free trial or whatever, 30-day trial or 15-day trial. I'll find that link or in that code, and I'll put it down in the description. I think it might even be Adam. Might be the code. I feel like I don't use Shudder as much as I should outside of the Joe Bob Briggs and outside of watching stuff that I've kind of either have DVDs of or can't be bothered to get off the couch. But the originals are sometimes hit and miss. The foreign ones are usually hits, but this is a real gem and a real worth checking out movie. Back to Blu-ray, but this is a more kind of general release. I've seen people picking this up at Walmart and Target. This is from Vestron Video, which is Lionsgate's kind of cult movie arm. And the thing with these Vestron Video releases is I talked about Blood Diner and something else. What did I talk about? Chopping Mall in a previous video, and I really liked those releases. And I have a bunch more that I haven't talked about. I have the Waxworks movies. I have the Wishmaster movies. The thing about these is they used to be super expensive, and now they're not. Shivers is not. I think it's like $12 or $13. They released this with Little Monsters, the Howie Mandel film. Shivers is the first, I guess, 90-minute feature film from David Cronenberg. He'd done 2 experimental films that are close to feature length before this, but this is not experimental. It's a narrative film. And if you're wondering whether or not I like the film Shivers, I'm wearing a Shivers shirt, so that's kind of an indicator where my heart lies on this one. I say this sometimes pretty liberally, but I haven't said it recently. This really might be my favorite Blu-ray release of the year. Not only the fact that it's a huge price cut from these Vestron that they've been having out, but A, one of my favorite movies. B, the presentation is gorgeous. The last time I saw this movie was, I think, 2013, 2014 at an Exhumed Films horror-thon, which was like an all-night marathon, and it was just a beat-up print, and it was great seeing it on the big screen. But this, I just adore this film, and I love the way it looks, and I love the way it looks on this release. And then on top of that, there are a bunch of newly produced, not holdovers, some of them are holdovers, but newly produced special features. They even got Cronenberg to sit down and talk about this film, and Lynn Lowry. There's not much to say about this other than the plot. It is about a Montreal apartment complex, kind of this all-inclusive apartment complex that has a shopping center in it. It has a doctor's office in it. It has like all this security and stuff. And one of the people becomes basically a patient zero for this parasite. He's growing these parasites inside his body, and these parasites are kind of like an STD. They're kind of like a venereal disease, and they're spreading throughout the apartment complex. It's kind of a mix between Night of the Living Dead, Night of the Creeps, which clearly came after it, and something like J.G. Ballard's High Rise, which came out actually the same year. These are that was published in 1975, and this movie came out in 1975. It is a Canadian horror film through and through. It feels Canadian. Cronenberg reveals in the special features that he originally didn't think he was going to be able to get kind of government funding to make this film in Canada, so he was all ready to move to LA and make it with Roger Corman, who sounded game to make it. But I love Roger Corman, but I'm so glad David Cronenberg got to make Shivers in Canada, because the movie wouldn't be the same otherwise. And if you haven't seen it, it's just the best. I'll put links down in the description if you're gonna buy one movie from, or if you're gonna stream one movie, because actually this is on Tubi as well, Tubi. If you're gonna stream one movie or watch one movie or buy one movie from this video, this would be my recommendation. But just a great movie. It really doesn't get the credit it deserves for inventing and working a lot of these tropes into where they are now and the things that come after it. It's pre-Alien, it's shortly post Night of the Living Dead, it's shortly post The Crazies, which also has Lynn Lowry, and you can feel the DNA kind of, this is like a discussion between America and Canada, a discussion between Romero and Cronenberg. But Cronenberg, he's one of our best, always has been, and if we don't put him on the horror Mount Rushmore, we've done a terrible disservice to the genre, because he is one of the best, and this is one of his best. It's his first film. There's some seams showing that it is a low-budget film. There's some seams showing that it is a first feature, but just the sheer inventiveness and weirdness and greatness that this movie reaches. Some of the coolest images in a horror movie. I love it. It's so good. And the last movie we're going to talk about, where we're also going to have a pretty lengthy discussion of a book recommendation. I was in such a David Cronenberg mood after watching Shivers. I kind of went to my shelf and I was like, okay, what's next chronologically? Let's watch Rabid. I don't have the disc. I have the old DVD, but it's in storage somewhere, so I don't have it. And I do not have the Scream Factory Blu-ray. Streaming to the rescue here, because Tubi, which is kind of the most underrated streaming service, because it's free, it doesn't cost anything, but you do have to watch commercials. But I will say the commercials are very unobtrusive. There's like 3 or 4 commercial breaks in a 90-minute movie. They usually put them at the act breaks. But I used Tubi to watch Rabid, which is, I believe, the same transfer that Shout Factory used and Scream Factory used. For the uninitiated, Rabid does have a similar plot, similar breakdown to Shivers, but it's not really a remake. I hear people talk about how like Rabid is either some kind of remake or some kind of redo of Shivers. Definitely not. It's its own movie with its own themes and its own concerns. And it's a bigger movie, but Rabid stars Marilyn Chambers as a woman who gets in a motorcycle accident right in the very beginning of the movie. The ambulance comes, but the ambulance is coming from a private doctor's office, a kind of a cosmetic surgery compound with this like genius cosmetic surgeon. She's all burned up. They need to do skin grafts. They're like, she's gonna die if we don't do this. We can't send her to a regular hospital. We need to do it here. And he does this experimental thing on her that's like regrowing tissue. It's kind of stem cells before like stem cells. And they're kind of concerned about like whether or not she's going to get tumors or cancerous growths from doing this skin graft. And that's not quite what happens. But we jump to 1 month later. Marilyn Chambers wakes up, and the first thing she does is it's almost a vampire movie. It's an outbreak movie because it's rabid, people getting rabies. But it's also a vampire movie in a way, because she's got this special little friend that lives in her armpit, and it's got a little barb on it, and she's got to suck blood. But it is a kind of Cronenberg-defining mix of body horror and eroticism and political satire. And these two movies, what a left hook, right hook, if you watch them kind of right in a row. Boy, Rabid, where Shivers is all kind of one location, all inside. Rabid, you really get to see the Quebec area, and you get to see a little bit of Montreal in the 70s, and you get to see like Montreal's underground malls and stuff like that. And it's just a really, I don't want to say nice film, because very bad things happen in it, and it's somewhat depressing, and it's gory and gross and makes you feel icky. But there's still something kind of comforting in that period, in Marilyn Chambers' performance, which is really, really good, and she does not get the credit she probably deserves for this film. Beyond being, beautiful, she's very interesting performance, and very multi-layered performance, where you're not quite sure to what degree she is in control of this thirst for blood that she has. And then you get little hints that there is some humanity left in her, maybe not. It's just such a cool movie, such a multi-layered, textured movie. That's enough of the Cronenberg love fest, but I'm probably going to continue. I'm probably going to Fast Company is also on Tubi, which is his racing movie, his drag racing movie. And then I have the Criterion, The Brood, and Videodrome and Scanners and stuff. So I'll probably just continue watching Cronenberg all through October. If you guys are doing themed watches like that this month, let me know down in the comments, because I find that stuff interesting. This week's book recommendation. I said in a previous video that I wanted to talk about comics more, talk about what I'm reading, what I'm enjoying, and this week we got a real corker for you. It's Killadelphia, like Philadelphia, but killing. I have the first few floppies of this, but I couldn't find them to hold up for the screen, so I'm holding up my iPad for you. But if you do read comics digitally, or you're going to your local comic book store, the first trade of this is out, the first 6 issues, and it's up to like issue 9 or 10 right now in floppies. It is, as you can probably tell by that cover, it is a vampire story. But it is not your typical vampire story to an extent. It's co-created by Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander, the writer and the artist. It is fabulous. It is so good. The last comic book we talked about was the Vampire the Masquerade from Vault, which is very cool and very good. And this is similar because it is vampires and they do work in a kind of hive way, but different because we're less with the vampire characters. We're more with the these cops and this medical investigator who are trying to figure out what's going on in Philadelphia. There's some kind of epidemic that may be related to yellow fever, may even be related to the second president of the United States, John Adams, when he came back from a trip to the Caribbean, Quincy, Massachusetts, and Philadelphia, and you're all over Philadelphia because you're in North one minute and then you're in Rittenhouse Square the next. But it's about these cops, a son who's a Baltimore cop who has a strained relationship with his father, who's a Philadelphia cop, and the medical investigator whose dad's kind of been on this case working this case. And in the first issue, not really a spoiler, but something bad happens to the dad, and the son has to come up to Philadelphia to kind of set things right. You'll see people talk on forums or on Facebook, or wherever people talk about horror books or wherever people talk about horror comics, they will kind of bemoan the use of tropes. They'll use the trope word like it's a bad word, like it means unoriginal. And Killadelphia is kind of the perfect example why people are wrong to use that word in such a way, and to use it kind of synonymous with stale. It stands on the shoulders of a lot of vampire fiction, but it does so in such a way that has a strong sense of place, some really great kind of political and social theming, and it brings a little bit of its own twist to the vampire mythology, like in tying it up with American history, tying it up with the fact that Philadelphia is where the Constitution was signed. That's 10 blocks that way from where I'm sitting, and it's really smart, and it doesn't feel like a history lesson because it's really goddamn fun and crazy and spooky too. The way the vampires like roost and stuff like that, and they're hanging upside down like bats, it's really cool. Like I said, the first trade's out now. If you like comics, if you like vampires, if you want to read a comic, it's Image Comics. In some ways it reminds me of like the kind of perfect step forward from the kind of 90s mall goth comic book kid I was, who read Spawn and who collected Vampire the Masquerade trading cards and stuff like that. Like it feels of a piece with that while not feeling like it's stuck in the past, while feeling very modern. It's got like mayoral politics in it too. It's really great. Art's awesome. It's somewhat impressionistic and somewhat abstract without completely losing reality. It's really fun. Great comic. All right, if you made it through the full, I guess, half hour of that, hit the like and subscribe button. Go check out my other videos if you want to see more rambling about movies, if you want to see more discussion of horror movies, if you want to talk books some more, if you want to read books, not only check out Killadelphia, but Clown in a Cornfield, out now, wherever books are sold. I have links down in the description. You can buy it from a big box, or you can buy it from a small indie bookstore. If you can buy it from Bookshop, I've got links down in the description that help them out. My other books, you can get those on audiobook, ebook, paperback. The audiobook of Clown is great. Thank you so much to everyone who's read. If you've read and you haven't left a review on Amazon or on Audible or on iTunes or on Barnes & Noble or wherever you got the book, if you haven't left a retailer review, it helps me out so much, because it's not only social proof that this is a good book and people should buy it, There's almost 200 reviews now on the Amazon site. But it's not only social proof, but it's kind of like analytic fuel. You're giving fuel to the book, so the internet can do its thing and serve it to more people. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm Adam Caesar. This has been Project Black T-shirt, and I guess I'm going to see you next week. I've got a lot of stuff coming out in October, and we'll talk about it next video, but see ya.